For those of you who missed the first story, this is a little summary. I got divorced from my ex-husband and fell on hard times. I had to move in with my sister who lives with her rich husband. When I moved in, he acted cold and distant even though I made sure I cooked and cleaned, and my sister said I didn't need to make any financial contributions. My sister's husband David was cold and distant until my son Roman arrived. He became nicer to me, my sister and my son. He tried to always be around my son even at odd hours. He would wash his clothes with my son's own and creepily came up to our room at midnight for an unjustifiable reason. So, I've been worried, and this is the update. In the past 4 days, I spoke with my sister Sarah, her boyfriend David, and my son Roman, all separately. 1 went well, 2 didn't. I have a lot to get off my chest, so this might be long. My first conversation was with my son, which occurred the night I posted my first update. In fear of this post getting removed like my first one, I'll have to censor myself, but I think you'll understand what I'm referring to when I say that I asked my son the serious and explicit questions. Roman adamantly denied that David ever did anything to him. He seemed surprised that I asked. He said he would have told me if he had. I believe him. I know he could be lying, but I'm trying to take his word for it. My son and I have a very open and transparent relationship. The first time my ex-husband ever verbally abused him, he came straight to me and told me about it. My guard is up, but I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like I was advised me, I didn't bring up the bedroom or laundry situation. But I was honest with him and told him that David's behavior toward him was inappropriate. We had a talk about boundaries, saying no, consent, etc. I drilled into him that David is not to drive him anywhere, text him anymore, and be around him alone under any circumstances. I also explained what grooming is, and that it's what David has been doing to him. He said he knew about it through a school assembly. Then, he said something that broke my heart. He apologized for letting David treat him that way, that he shouldn't have fell for it, his exact words. I assured him that none of it was his fault. I want to make it clear that David is not preying on him because of how he looks or how he acts. He is doing it because he is a predator and they prey on the vulnerable. Honestly, I could tell that the conversation had left him a little shell-shocked. To know that the person you liked and trusted isn't who you thought he was would leave any kid rattled. For the entire rest of the night, he followed me around like a lost puppy. It did break my heart a little, to see him like that, but I don't want him to feel a false sense of security around David, so I have no regrets about it. Sarah was next. I knew it would turn into an argument before the conversation even began. It's always been that way with her. My sister is nice, but not kind. She'll take you in off the street, but then throw it back in your face if you cross her. So I knew what I was getting into, but I had to do it not only for my kid Sake, but for hers. This is not a man I want her to be with, have children with, nor do I want him in our family. I told her that I was uncomfortable with the way David acts around Roman, and that I think it's a lot deeper than what he portrays it to be. I mentioned that I didn't like the gift giving and the constant texting, and I brought up the bedroom and laundry incidents. Like I predicted, she was more offended that I was accusing her boyfriend of grooming my son. She didn't see how that was proof of anything. Do you know how many socks and pairs of underwear I've lost while doing laundry? It's probably stuck somewhere in the dryer. The more I expressed my concerns, the more defensive she got. She thinks I'm manic, essentially. She said that as soon as things get good for me, roof over my head, food in the fridge, a steady job, I intentionally screw it up because deep down I don't think I deserve happiness. That she tries to help me every time, but I end up stabbing her in the back, like I am right now. So, she doesn't believe me. That's her prerogative, fine. I told her that I won't be staying at her house much longer, and that I don't want David around my kid anymore, that we'll be keeping to ourselves for the rest of my short time here. She's letting me stay, surprisingly, but she said she's glad to see me go. She swore up and down that David would never hurt Roman, and that she was sad to see their relationship ruined over an accusation with no real basis. That I shouldn't let my self-destructive behavior and my bipolar paranoia get in the way of other people's happiness. And that I better not accuse her boyfriend of being a predator anymore. Essentially, she kept shifting the blame onto me, so I ended it there. Oh, and she told me that she wants reimbursement for things like clothing and grocery shopping, because apparently we are draining her wallet with buying so much food. Yes, An 8th grader going through a growth spurt eats a lot. Shocker. But I apologized and said I'd buy his and my groceries from now on. David came back from his church retreat Friday morning, which is when I confronted him. I was very upset, so I didn't go easy on him. He was thrown off by my hostility, but once he understood what I was implying, his demeanor shifted. Sit down, let's talk about it, he kept saying, except he was the one who was nervous and looked like he was on the brink of a panic attack. I kept my composure. I asked him why he was in my son's room in the middle of the night with the door shut. He gave me the same excuse, that he was looking for his cell phone. I asked him why he couldn't have gone for it in the morning. He said that he set the alarm to 5 a.m. for work, and that he didn't want it to go off with my son in the room and wake him up. I asked him why he was standing over my son's bed. He admitted that he was trying to wake him up and asked him if he'd seen his phone. Did he not just say that he didn't want the alarm to wake him up? I asked him what on earth would compel him to think it is okay to wake up my child in the middle of the night to help him look for a cell phone. He said he wasn't thinking straight, and that he was sorry. I asked him about the missing laundry as well. He adamantly denied what I was implying. He said that his and my sister's clothing get lost in the laundry all the time. That he would help me find my son's missing clothing. All while apologizing profusely. I'll admit, I was thrown off by how apologetic he was, and it made me a little soft. I thanked him for letting us stay in his house, and I apologized for not setting boundaries earlier. But I told him that from now on, I didn't feel comfortable with him being around my son. No more driving him places, buying him gifts, texting him, helping him with homework, doing his laundry, etc. I essentially told him that he is no longer allowed to be alone with my son or touch his things under any circumstances. He broke down in tears. He was hysterical. The thought of me believing that he is preying on my son made him miserable. That he'd never do that. He said, "I love him like a father loves a son." When reading my original post, a lot of you believed the same thing at first. So did I, but I just don't like the way David looks at him. Yes, I see the kindness in his eyes toward my son as he helps him with homework or watches a show with him, but there is a nuance of something covetous and sinister that I can't shake off. Anyway, I told him that it's unhealthy for him to be so fixated on a child, and that he cannot depend on my kid for happiness. I told him that we'd be leaving very soon, more on that later. I didn't tell him where or when it was happening. He asked if there was anything he could do to rectify the situation. He suggested that the four of us sit down and talk about it. I declined. I reiterated that he is not allowed near my kid anymore and left it at that. A small part of me feels like I was too harsh on him overall. Maybe he was just looking for his phone. Maybe it's a coincidence that articles of clothing are missing. But he was on his knees, sobbing, like I had just pulled the rug out from underneath him. For a child he hasn't known for that long. I don't think he was devastated that I'd accused him of being a predator. He was devastated that I revoked his access to my child. I'm not stupid. I once witnessed this man argue with my sister, brutal, verbal assaults from both sides, which ended in my sister crying. He didn't shed a tear. For my peace of mind, and yours, I have been watching Roman like a hawk. When I'm home, he's with me. When I'm not home, he's at a trusted friend's house, or again, with me. I actually took him to work with me this morning, which he wasn't thrilled about, but whatever. I made him block David's number, of course. We haven't been in the house since Friday, but as some of you suggested, I will sleep in his room at night instead of making him sleep in my room. I'll be honest, I decided to hold off on drug testing him, because I really do not think David has been drugging him. My son is naturally a heavy sleeper and has always had issues waking up for school, even before we moved into my sister's house. I checked his text messages, and from what I've seen, he's never texted David at night. He's usually up texting his friends in a group chat. Like you all suggested, I purchased a nanny cam, specifically the one where you can watch the footage on your smartphone. I wasn't expecting it to be so pricey. I ordered them on Wednesday, and they are due to arrive tonight or Monday morning. I'll put it in my son's room and review it every day. I'm really nervous because there's a possibility that I'll see something odious and I don't know if I can handle that. Lots of you have voiced your concerns for my kid. From what I've seen and from what he's told me, he's doing fine. We have been staying at a motel for the weekend, now that David has returned from his church retreat. I wasn't taking any chances. $56 a night, and a little sketchy, but I don't want to complain. Again, despite the situation, his mood has been a lot better than mine has. He thinks a motel is the same as a hotel, so to him, it's like we're on a mini vacation. It's mind-blowing how kids can be so resilient, even in the most unnerving situations. The majority of you have told me to go to a women's shelter. I looked into this, and while it's an option, the closest one to where I live is more than an hour away. I don't have a car.
I can take the bus, my usual mode of transportation, but that disrupts his commute to school, and my commute to work.
It's still winter and freezing cold where I live, so I'd rather watch him like a hawk than live on the street and subject him to the cold weather. And I am not taking him back to my ex-husband's house. There's a reason why he left, and why I divorced him. Which brings me to some good news. I applied for public housing a long while back and I am in the process of getting approved. They contacted me for documentation, which I submitted, and I got verified, so I think that's a good sign. I'm very fortunate, since I know waitlists can be long sometimes. I can't believe I'm holding it together so well, but I'm proud of myself. I think I'm doing everything I can. Thank you for listening. I'll update again shortly with hopefully better news. Update 3. I have both bad news and good, really good news. Due to the bad news, I'm not mentally doing the best right now, so I'm sorry if this is scrambled, because I don't really know where to start. I'm angry, hurt, disgusted, and as all of my emotions begin to pile upon each other, I'm beginning to spiral a bit. And before anyone begins to worry, I'll put it out there now that my son is doing okay. I guess I'll start off by saying that my son and I weren't in the house much, up until Friday of this week. We'd been staying at a local motel that's decently close to his school and where I work. I am a waitress at a restaurant, and my manager knows I'm dealing with housing issues, so he's been a bit understanding with me when I call out. But when you don't work, you don't get paid, and between the lifts, takeouts, and motel costs, my wallet isn't doing so great, but I'm 100% making it work, and I have no regrets. But since we weren't at the house, things sort of escalated a bit. David's number is blocked on Roman's phone, but he found him on TikTok and Instagram on Monday night and messaged him there. Nothing explicit in the messages, just things like, "Did you block my number? I really miss talking to you, is everything okay? Maybe in the future, we can talk to each other again. I'm sorry if I upset you or your mom. Are you and your mom safe? Where are you staying? Respond to me when you get a moment. I have something important to tell you." And many more like that, just him begging my son for a conversation. I was livid when my son showed me. I think what set me off the most is that I know David messaged him because he thought my kid would respond without telling me. He thinks they have some secret, private relationship right under my nose that I'm interfering with. I'm pretty sure that's why he hasn't kicked me out of his house. He's not mad, just miserable and desperate for some sort of contact. I feel like no matter how hard I pull my son away from David, he's refusing to let go. We blocked the Instagram and TikTok accounts immediately, and I screenshotted the messages. I'm trying to keep a record of everything. I asked Roman to delete his Snapchat account, just in case, but he didn't want to do that. I'm 99% sure he has a girl on there that he likes. I let that slide because he came straight to me about the other accounts, and he agreed not to add any new accounts on Snapchat or post anything that gave away our location for the time being. This entire ordeal upset my son. He broke down in tears when he came back from school the next day. That hurt a lot to see. I don't know if I expressed this, but Roman genuinely liked David, and they got along well. Maybe my kid saw him as a father figure, since he was shunned and neglected by my ex-husband. I think I underestimated the mental toll it would take on him from having to cut David off completely, and then block him when he reached out privately. Someone noted that I should get him into therapy soon. I plan on doing that once we are securely living on our own and I find the money for it. It's definitely a priority. David's harassment spilled over to me, too. He called me multiple times and texted me things like, "Let me know when you're back so we can resolve this. Am I allowed to attend Roman's baseball game on Thursday with you? I'd like to support him. Can you please answer? I'd really love to talk, just us. I'm sorry if I gave you both the wrong impression." I didn't block his number on my phone. I figured that the more he talked, the more likely he'd continue to incriminate himself and I could use his words against him. I didn't answer a single one of his questions, but I let him know that if he contacted my kid ever again or if he showed up to his school or any events that I'd go straight to the police. And that's not an empty threat, either. Unbeknownst to him, I am getting the police involved because I now have solid evidence that this man has a sick obsession with my child. This is the bad news, and I'll forewarn you that if you're easily triggered, please don't read any further, or at least skip this in the next 2 paragraphs. I want to thank you all for confirming my suspicions in the first post, because I found something heinous. I mentioned that I planned to set up a camera in Roman's room. I asked for his permission first, and he said he didn't care since we're barely in the house anymore. The camera I chose is motion sensitive and links the footage to my iPhone, so I can watch it anywhere. The camera was set up on Sunday night as soon as I received the package, and I hid it above the doorframe, so that it overlooked the entire room.
You can't see it unless you use a ladder.
I didn't get anything for a couple days. I was randomly notified of movement in the room, but saw nothing when I looked at the footage. But on Wednesday evening, at around 6, David came into my son's room, stood there for a moment, and then left, no longer than a minute. An hour-ish later, he returned and started going through his drawers. He picked up a specific garment and left within less than 2 minutes. I wanted to throw up. I didn't sleep that entire night at the motel. The following day, I had someone cover my shift, which gave me the opportunity to do a deep search of David's room while he was at work and my son was at school. I found the article of clothing inside of his pillowcase, on top of the pillow, right where he would lay his head to rest at night. I was so sick to my stomach that it took me almost 2 hours to confiscate that article of clothing and check it for evidence. I won't elaborate, but you can infer what I mean. I was nauseated the entire time. All I could do was put on gloves, throw it into a Ziploc bag, and shove it into my closet. I didn't want to look at it or even think about it. I still don't. That answers the question of why David was so insistent on doing my kids' laundry. Who knows how long this has been going on? I've been ruminating on the next steps to take. Besides my main priority, going to the police, my other priority is telling my sister Sarah. We are obviously not on the best terms right now. She found out that I confronted her boyfriend last week, and she is livid. How dare I accuse him of grooming my son? Apparently, he's not the same man he was after we left, and returned to his old habits. He was back to going to bars with his friends every evening. His drinking got worse. He had stopped coming home early from work and dragged himself through the door at almost midnight, if he even bothered coming home, that is. And he was no longer affectionate toward her. Apparently, it's my fault he's depressed again. If those aren't red flags, I don't know what is. I can't tell if she is in denial, or if she can't actually see them. But what she's most concerned about is that David hasn't been home since Thursday. He went to work, came home briefly, then left again without telling her when he'd be back. In my head, that makes sense. He knows that either she or I took the garment that was inside of his pillowcase, and now he's afraid to come home. It confirms all of my suspicions. I will tell my sister everything, though, probably tonight or tomorrow. I have no idea how to go about it, and I guess I'm nervous about her reaction. She's still convinced that I'm having a manic episode. I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 many years ago, and I take medication to manage it. If I go off of my meds, my mania will progressively get worse until I spiral into psychosis. So her concerns are valid. I put her through a lot back when I wasn't stable, but that's not the current case for me right now. I have tangible proof and video proof of her boyfriend being a creep. I can bring up the camera footage, but then I have the issue of not getting either of their consent to put a camera in their house, and I don't know how well that would go over with her, even if it was for a good reason. I just know that if I were in her shoes, I would be grateful that my boyfriend, potential fiancé, was outed as a predator before I got engaged to him. She's pretty much past the age of having children, but has plans to adopt in the distant future, so I have to tell her, somehow. My son and I have been back in the house since Friday night. My sister still isn't kicking me out, but she doesn't want me here anymore. She's made that very clear. The only reason why I haven't packed our things and left is because, again, David is gone. He won't tell anyone his whereabouts and has turned off his location on his phone, according to my sister. She thinks he might be crashing on a friend's couch, something he's done multiple times in the past. I think he knows I'm onto him. But his absence means that I can stay at the house for now. I'm still watching my kid like a hawk and staying hyper-vigilant. Still sleeping in his room, taking him to work with me, etc. I can live with the hostility from my sister as long as he is safe, especially since we won't be here for much longer. Which leads me to the good news. I got approved for public housing. I won't share too many details, but I will share the most important one. We'll get to move in a little over 3 weeks. There are a lot of logistics that I need to work out, the school bus system, a mode of transportation to work, etc. But I'm glad that something is working out in my favor after this week of hell. The constant vigilance is exhausting, and I can't wait to be in a safer environment. I guess all I really have left to say is that I'm not sure how to go about providing the evidence I have to the police. When I give them what I have, they'll start some kind of investigation, right? I'm just nervous that I could get into trouble for the camera. And the messaging. That counts as harassment, right? Do I tell my sister everything before I go to the police? Any advice you can give is welcome, because I've never been in a situation like this before, and I don't want to mess it up. Just because I am leaving does not mean that I'm letting David get away with what he's done. Thank you all for your unwavering support. I'm having a hard time right now, but I'll update as soon as I can. Thank you for listening.